Good stuff. Okay, great. Welcome to the Biz Live. We've had a couple of technical issues. That's a first in 12 episodes, and that brings me on to point number 1. It is our 12th episode today. A big welcome to one and all. You are watching the Biz Live. My name is Jamie Breeze. I'm your host. Waiting in the wings is our guest speaker today, Sir Ashley Fox. More about him and his new enterprise as the chair of the IMA shortly. And we'll be meeting my co-host, Sarah Brooks, who's also the co-producer of the show. A big thank you to our sponsor, and that is Adam Rook and all the team at Professional Apprenticeships. So we have a couple of technical issues coming backwards and forwards, but if you can still hear me, then we're doing well. We're also simulcasting onto YouTube. It's like a legacy channel for us, and at the same time on Facebook Live. Usually, LinkedIn will post this stream directly afterwards, and within a few days, we'll have 1,000 views. And they do say, I made this up, 1 view on LinkedIn during the daytime, especially in the working day, is probably worth about 50 on YouTube. Not picking on YouTube or nothing. Great. So once again, my name is Jamie Breeze. If you are just joining, please do introduce yourself into the chat. A big thank you to our sponsor, Professional Apprenticeships and Adam et al. See you in a moment. Great. Sarah, if you can hear me, how are you?
I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Good stuff. Doesn't matter what powerful computer we've bought ourselves to make this show work. There's still a bit of a time delay and there's an extra lag today. So if you see me sort of glazing off over there or glazing over there, it's all time delayed. It's not happening in real time, but technically we're live, just minus 15 seconds. So tell me, Sarah, tell us a little bit about our guest, but also our talking point and our theme as well, please.
Well, Jane, until a certain pandemic came along last year, Brexit was, of course, the big news story, wasn't it? And Sir Ashley was very much at the heart of all the turbulence as leader of the Conservative MEPs in Strasbourg. And also he was on the board of the Conservative Party at that time as well, 2014 to 2019. So we reckon that he's going to have quite a lot to say about all of that. He voted Remain, if people didn't know that. So he was, well, I'm sure he's got lots of stories to tell about the battles that went on over that time. And of course, there are still lots of negotiations ahead with Brexit. It's not over yet. So if you think it's all done and dusted, that ain't the case. So what do you reckon, a smooth or a bumpy road ahead? We shall see. I
feel my job in danger here. That was a very good intro. Not it shouldn't surprise me, given the fact you've been a broadcast journalist for the BBC for many years as well. But thank you very much. That was very eloquent. Tell us about our theme today as well.
Well, so our theme, of course, is Brexit, Europe and beyond. And our talking point is, how has Brexit affected you, either personally or in your business? Have you seen opportunities or barriers ahead of you? What do you think it actually means for you? So please pop your thoughts and comments in the chat and I will bring them to our programme a bit later.
That's great. So you're going to be in the background moderating the comments, keeping things moving along in the background. And do remember the genesis of the Biz Live is actually, well, the mothership, if that's the right parlance, is Evo networking, which is something which Sarah and I do day in, day out. It's been going for 5 years. And in fact, just this very morning, as I was saying to Sir Ashley earlier on, we've launched a new group in Wales. So business networking, which seems to be working rather well online. But I know many people will be looking forward to that time when we can get back and meet face to face, all in due course. Okay. But if you'd like to come along, if you'd like to visit one of the Evo groups, perhaps Sarah will put the website in there as a link and you can come along for your first visit for free. And again, this show, sincerely, trust me, would not be possible without our sponsors. All of this season has been sponsored by Professional Apprenticeships. I'll be telling you a bit more about them later on. And if we're lucky, the CEO or Managing Director, Adam, will be coming into the green room later on to maybe ask a question to Sir Ashley as well. So any questions you've got for our guest today, please pop them into the chat. Do remember the theme. It is Brexit, Europe and beyond. And our talking point, just to praise you once again, is how has Brexit affected you, either personally in your business? But it's not all about that today, because we're going to go into a bit of a deep dive over the next 15 or 20 minutes into Ashley's background, his background in business as a solicitor, and much more, and certainly talk about this new endeavour for which he's recently been appointed the board to, but more about the IMA in a little while. The Biz Live is non-political, but it's lovely to have somebody of Sir Ashley's good standing here and to talk freely about the issues, his past, and also the future ahead. I'm sure being such an experienced person in both business but also in politics will have a great take on a bit of crystal ball gazing as well. If you can hear me, Ashley, please bear in mind we'll be asking for a view on the future, when we're going to get out of this crisis and what's the future for our situation given the Brexit challenges. For those of you who are just joining, please do introduce yourself into the chat. Very important that you connect. If you like what people are saying, give them a thumbs up. If you like what we're saying, I believe, I can't see it, but there's a little hand if you're coming in on LinkedIn at the moment, and some hearts which come up, or some thumbs up. Do give us a few of those. It helps game the algorithm. And I know that we're collaborating with LinkedIn and the team in New York, having this lucky accreditation. So if you'd like to take part in the next episode, it will be next Tuesday. Connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the best way to find out when we go live. Once again, you're watching the Biz Live. My name is Jamie Breeze, and welcome to episode number 12, sponsored by Professional Apprenticeships. Okay, Sarah, thank you very much indeed. We will be seeing you in about 20 minutes' time. And if anything of note pops up and you'd like to comment, just ask directly to Sarah. She's moderating the chat. I've got my fancy, aka very cheap mug here, and enjoying my 20th cup of coffee, no doubt, since the launch of a new networking group in Wales today. Okay, thank you very much indeed, Sarah Brooks. We will see you shortly.
See you later.
Okay, as I always say, freeze a crowd. So we're going to welcome our very special guest today. All our guests are special, of course, but we have a knight of the realm, I think that's the correct wording, and somebody with enormous experience, a passion for Great Britain and Europe as well. So please give a hand with the little hearts coming up. If you can see that emoticon, please give a big welcome to Sir Ashley Fox. Hello there. Good morning, Ashley. How are you today?
Good morning, Jamie. I'm very well indeed, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely lovely to have you on the gig, as it were. And I remember, I think it was maybe a month or so ago, roughly halfway through the cycle of these episodes, I saw you pop up and comment, and it was lovely to have you taking part in the show. Was it Graham Ash or maybe Michelle Michael?
I think it was Graham, yes. But I enjoy following these. It's very informative.
Great. Well, look, thank you very much for now being part of it as well. Here we are in our virtual studio. We do actually have a studio, and we use Origin Workspace in the city of Bristol in the UK, and it's a fancy studio. We have all our lighting set up, but actually we've managed to make it work just about okay using the home tech, as long as it doesn't freeze again like it has done twice already. That's a rarity. And again, I just wanted to say a big special thank you to Adam and the team at Professional Apprenticeships for supporting today. So as you know, our guest today is Ashley Fox. We're going to look into the past, present, future. If you're just joining now, please introduce yourself into the chat. It is a live show, and we will be finishing on or around 12:15 today, GMT. Lastly, if you are coming in from a different part of the world, we've had people chime in from India, from Dubai, UAE, etc. Please do let us know as well, and keep the chat going as well. And do connect with people who you think you'd like to connect with, because we're on LinkedIn, which is great. And if you're on Facebook or YouTube, terribly sorry, but do leave a comment and give us a like. And if you got value from today, please subscribe. Okay, that's all the formalities out of the way. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your background. There's a couple of questions I know I'm itching to ask. I see things coming up there in the comments. But tell us about your early years, perhaps from, when you went to school or uni to the point that you got your first role in as a solicitor. How did that come to pass? What was your sort of epiphany, as it were?
So I was brought up in Malvern in Worcestershire, which is a very nice part of the world, but very quiet. I went to Bristol Polytechnic and did a law degree, liked Bristol very much. So that's where I applied to do my articles, because in those days you did 2 years articles before becoming a solicitor. Mm-hmm. And it was a different world then. I remember back in 1989, I wrote 6 letters to get my traineeship, and I had an interview within a week and a job offer within another week. The jobs market was booming. You might remember the Lawson boom. So I got my training contract in Bristol, with a firm called Wandsborough's Willie Hargrave. They have eventually become Beechcrofts after many mergers, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I stayed with them for 4 years, and eventually ended up at a firm called Badams Thompson. And they were quite an innovative firm because they had just won the in-house contract for direct line insurance. So I found myself heading up an in-house litigation unit in direct line in Bristol, working with the staff there, setting up what was then a very new concept of solicitors going into the office and providing services direct. And I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed working with the people there.
So it was a quick rise in the world of law, broadly speaking, and I noticed you went to Bristol Polytechnic. That's my old alma mater, now then latterly called the University of the West of England, or UWE if you're outside the southwest of England. So the southwest, born and bred, studied there as well. And I also did art, but not articles. I did art at the Barrow Ashton campus. So we have more than perhaps our ships passed at one point in the last year or something. So you started off in law, and I understand that you experienced somewhere along the line, maybe in that DAC Beechcroft or Direct Line, you experienced redundancy yourself. Tell us a bit about that, if you would, and how that felt, and has that given you empathy for others when going through a crisis in their professional career?
Yes, so cast your mind back many years. In 2003, Direct Line Insurance bought Churchill Insurance. Mm-hmm. And of course, these two great brands merged, and the pressure on the management was to make savings. And sad to say, the litigation team in Bristol was one of those savings. And I was offered the opportunity either to move to Birmingham or to accept redundancy. And that was difficult because I had two small children, and my son was due to start at infant school imminently. And that was a tough decision. And I decided to remain in Bristol. I took redundancy in 2005. And that was quite traumatic. There's a real feeling of rejection. I felt I built up quite a good team in Bristol. And I was told several years later by someone at Direct Line that closing the Bristol litigation office had been a dreadful mistake and it cost them a fortune. But that's all in the past. But I do have great sympathy for those people now who have been made redundant or facing redundancy. I faced that twice in my career. First of all, as a solicitor, and then, of course, as an MEP when my job came to an end. But it's just something you have to work through. But it's tough.
So, as you mentioned, and I mentioned at the top, and anyone who knows, who's particularly interested in European politics, will know that you were the MEP, or for those outside of Europe, the member of the European Parliament, covering the southwest of England, for which we are all actually broadcasting from today live, but also Gibraltar as well, which is an interesting combination. But tell us about the, you became the chair of the, if that's the right word, the head of the Conservative Party, 2014 to 2019, till your term ended, as it were, in Europe. So what were the kind of responsibilities and the roles for that appointment?
So, yes, I was first elected to the European Parliament in 2009, re-elected in 2014, and shortly after being re-elected, the other Conservative MEPs elected me as their leader, which was a great challenge. And one of the responsibilities was liaising with the party leader, who, of course, at the time was the Prime Minister, David Cameron. And I briefed him on what was going on in the European Parliament. He was a very intelligent, eloquent man, very determined, but someone I think that was always on transmit rather than receive. And we'll all be used to leaders like that, and that is a way of leading. And you constantly broadcast to your troops what you want, but I'm not sure he was the greatest of listeners. I did support him in his decision to hold a referendum. I thought that was always inevitable, given that we in Britain have a very different view of the European Union to many countries on the continent. I think Britain wasn't defeated in war, hasn't been occupied. We didn't really view the European Union as a peace project. We didn't view it as a political union that would grow. We saw it as a transaction. And I think as the costs of being in the EU became more expensive, that's why the popularity of the EU fell in this country.
So you've been elected, returned, as it were. You've been leading this group of politicians collectively through the European experience, and you touched on briefing the then Prime Minister David Cameron. I think I did an auction before him and found myself in the Tatler alongside him, which was very nice. You also briefed Mrs. May as well, is that correct?
Yes, so of course, David Cameron resigned as Prime Minister after the referendum. Mrs. May took over from him, and she was a very different Prime Minister. Very calm, very thoughtful. When I and others would brief her, she'd sit us down and ask questions and then listen to what we had to say. And this was in quite a contrast to David Cameron. And I liked Mrs. May very much. I thought she was a kind and thoughtful person. But clearly, she was greatly handicapped by the fact that in 2017, she chose to call a general election and lost the majority. And I think that was very difficult for her. Authority drained away. It became difficult for her to implement her policies. And as she struggled to negotiate Brexit, of course, in the House of Commons, there were a number of MPs who not only voted Remain, because I campaigned to Remain, but they then took it upon themselves to say, well, because I don't like it, I'm not going to allow it to happen. And I think that was a great political mistake. Because the moment the referendum was held, I was on the losing side, but I thought this result has to be respected. And I spent 3 years doing my best to implement it. Of course, some MPs thought they knew better. And so rather than help Mrs. May get the job done, they just voted against what she came back and proposed. Now, the result of that, of course, was that she stood down as leader. We had a general election in 2019. Boris Johnson is Prime Minister, and Brexit has happened. And it's quite right that it has happened. I think a lot of those MPs who thought they knew better than the British public paid a heavy price, and rightly so.
So you're literally no connection to the TV satirical comedy, but you're literally in the thick of it, as it were. You briefed one of my favourite shows, by the way, for someone who's non-political as such. You have to be non-political when you're running a business network, I have to say, and I genuinely am, and I'm interested in all sides of it. I was a Booked on the Today programme in the 1980s as a young child, so that's what it tells you. But so we've talked about Boris Johnson. You've also briefed him, but I think that was during the time when he was the Foreign Secretary. Is that right? What was your take on Boris, if you don't mind sharing?
Yes, a very warm person, very charismatic, and makes you feel you're the most important person in the room, when, of course, the truth is he is. But I've been at meetings with Boris and led him across a room, and he is mobbed. He's mobbed by people who want to shake his hand, who want a selfie, and he takes time to speak to them, to have that selfie. He's very warm and very engaging and charismatic. Extraordinary that he became Prime Minister to deliver Brexit and instead has found himself with this dreadful pandemic to deal with. Incredibly difficult situation I think he finds himself in. But from where I'm sitting and the vaccination strategy that the government has come up, I think they're making a reasonable fist of it, and good luck to him.
Personal question: how did you feel after the 2016 referendum? How was that for you, given your position and the result? And how do you think Boris is doing?
No secret, I campaigned to Remain. I was disappointed my side lost. But I think if you agree to hold a referendum, you have to be prepared to honour the result, whatever it was. And so once the decision was taken, I saw it as my role as leader of the MEPs to make Brexit happen. I spent 3 years trying to do that. And our efforts were thwarted by a number of MPs in the House of Commons who decided they knew best. And I thought that was incredibly destructive for faith in public life in Britain. Now, of course, these things have a way of working themselves out. And in the end, when Mrs. May's deal wouldn't go through, she stood down. Boris became the new Prime Minister, and he led us to a general election with his New Deal, which the people voted for. It always struck me that those MPs who thought they knew better than the British people were setting themselves up for a very big fall, because they were inviting a general election in which the theme was going to be, are you sure you got it right in 2016? And the people were always very likely to come back and say, yes, we meant it. And that was the result. So, yes, personally disappointed at the result, but determined to make it work, and, reasonably optimistic now.
So we're going to jump forward just a little bit. I want to bring in my colleague Sarah Brooks just to see how the questions are going in the chat. So excuse us for a moment while we welcome Sarah Brooks back. Caught you out there having a sip on your tea. How are the questions looking? How are things coming on? We've got guests coming in. There's Paul Burden, there's Sean who's over there in Cardiff, and there's even our sponsor Adam Brooks. So lots of people taking part today. And there's Bernd Langham as well from he's from Germany, but he lives in the United Kingdom. Go ahead, Sarah.
So Mark Terrell asks the questions, Rashdi. There's a lot of focus on the immediate problem with Brexit. Do you think long-term opportunities will balance out the issues?
So I think different industries in the United Kingdom, some will benefit and some will not benefit, depending on whether they trade closely with the European Union or not. But we have to remember that the European Union is not a static project. It is constantly seeking to become more of a political union and to take more powers from the member states to itself. And I mean, witness the latest budget settlement in which many billions of euros are going to be borrowed by the EU, loaned to the countries worst affected by the coronavirus, and then eventually paid back. Had we still been a member of the European Union, I think that would have been almost impossible for any British Prime Minister to have agreed with. I think that would have been a real crunch point. And we see over the vaccine strategy, the European Union has not covered itself in glory because everything was so centralized and so slow. I mean, that is one of the problems with the EU. In my view, rather than concentrating on what it did rather well, which was creating a single market that worked and made us all better off, it had this tendency to stray off into other areas and say, Europe knows best. And whatever the problem, the answer was more Europe. So we've got the coronavirus pandemic. What's the answer? Oh, more Europe. How long before we have a high representative for health matters in Europe? And this is a problem. So I think the opportunities of Brexit are that we won't be tied to this centralizing and exceptionally bureaucratic body, which is becoming more centralizing as time goes by. And in fact, with the United Kingdom having left, one of the brakes on that centralizing tendency has disappeared.
So do you think then that it was, would you have changed your mind, or would you change your mind now about your decision? Do you think it's a good thing to be in the European Union now, or is it a good for us that we're not in the European Union? You think?
I voted as I did in 2016. That's 5 years ago. Decision taken. And we can't constantly replay and say, what if, what if? What we need to do is accept the decision's been made.
Yes,
I'm just wondering for 40 years. So, the key now is to make the best of the situation we're in and to take advantage of that. And we've seen with the vaccination program, for example, how a smaller, more nimble country can actually do much, much better than this huge supertanker that takes ages to turn around. And there will be other opportunities. The opportunities, I think, will come in the regulation of the future, the regulation of fintech, the regulation of genetically modified GMOs, where Europe is very slow and very anti. With new technologies, I think Britain will be able to find regulations that fit business better. But I understand at the moment, a couple of months after the transition finished, there are problems with customs and a lot of bumps in the road, and we just got to work our way through that.
Good stuff. Okay, well, look, thank you for that, Ashley, and also thank you, Sarah. If I can now banish you back into your into your back room comment moderating, and if you could, I can see lots of questions coming in there from Mark Terrell, Gareth Jones, Ian Porter, who's been now with us on every single show as well, former mayor and head of one of the seniors at Western College, I'm pleased to say as well, which are not a million miles away from us as well. So Sarah, if you could pop back in about 4 or 5 minutes time, I'm going to talk to Ashley now about the kind of the present, as it were. Thank you very much indeed, Sarah. Bye-bye. And you are watching the Biz Live. If you're just joining in now, we know it's your working day if you're watching on LinkedIn. And we are very, very lucky to be having a fireside chat, as it were, with our guest today, Sir Ashley Fox. You're watching the Biz Live. My name is Jamie Breeze. We'll see you in a few seconds' time. Okay, so Ashley, we've been talking about the past, about the present, your feelings about the European situation. I think it would be important before we go today to explore your sort of views on the COVID crisis and where we're going to go with that, being someone who's got their finger on the pulse, as it were, and has been responsible for communities in the past. Tell us a bit about your recent work in business. You've become a consultant. What does that involve? And also in December, I understand you were appointed to the board of the IMA. Could you tell us about both, please?
Yes, of course. So once the referendum took place, I knew I was going to lose my job as an MEP. So I did some research and thought there is a market for me to set myself up as an advisor in EU affairs. And that's been what I've been doing since July 2019 for a number of clients in Brussels. And I advise them on a variety of matters. I mean, to take an example, the very first piece of advice I was asked to give was to analyse the 27 men and women nominated to be commissioners and to say which of these will pass the confirmation hearing and which ones are vulnerable. I identified 6 as being vulnerable, and I'm pleased to say that of the 3 that failed the confirmation process, all 3 were on my list of 6. And that comes from having knowledge of how the EU works, having contacts in different parts of the institutions and speaking to people and forming a view of who is vulnerable and why. So I've been doing that for 18 months now. And then you're right, in December, I was appointed chairman of the board of the Independent Monitoring Authority of the Citizens' Rights Agreements, to give it its very long name, the IMA. And the IMA is an impartial body. It is set up to monitor and promote the rights of EU citizens. EU citizens are granted certain rights under the withdrawal agreement, just as British citizens are granted rights if they're living abroad. The right to reside, the right to work, the right to have professional qualifications recognised, the right to social security recognition. And so the IMA will monitor how those rights are respected and will promote those rights. And of course, at the moment, EU citizens, to protect their rights, have to register with the government's scheme for settled status. They have until the 30th of June of this year to register. And so far, 5 million EU citizens have registered. That's enormously welcome. It shows that many, many of them have registered, but we're aware that there are still EU citizens living in Britain that have not registered. And therefore, I would say to those listening, if you are an EU citizen, if you know EU citizens, if you employ them, please encourage them to register their rights before the 30th of June, because that enables them to protect their status in the United Kingdom.
So before the 30th of June, okay, and I had a look at the website and so forth. How long has the IMA been in existence for? Is it something, I'm thinking my ignorance, was it set up post Brexit vote or beforehand? Is it something which has been around since the formation of the EU? What's the...
So we went live at 11 p.m. on the 31st of December. So as the United Kingdom left the transition period, so the IMA went live. There had been an interim chief executive appointed several months before. She was responsible for employing key staff. The board was appointed about a month before, and we're all up and ready to get running on the 31st of December. So we've been going for just about 6-7 weeks now.
Busy?
Yes. Yes. Of course, there are challenges to setting up a new organisation during this epidemic. The IMA has an office in Swansea with a beautiful view of the bay. I've only managed to get there once. Every other meeting has been online.
Right.
I think the interim chief executive is doing an extraordinary job in trying to meld together a team of people who actually can't meet in person. So there are challenges to operating, but thus far, I think we're doing remarkably well.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, look, thanks for telling us about the IMA. And initially, when I heard the initial name, it sounded like a monitoring body from GCHQ or something. And I'm glad you explained the rest of the title as well, because it does make sense. And thank you for sharing that. And also, it's a question I've been bursting to ask. I try and ask every night of the realm we have on the show. In other words, we haven't had any yet, but we will do. No doubt they'll all be flooding in. A huge honour. I meant to get a knighthood. So can I ask, what was that like? What was the big day like? Did you meet Her Majesty? Was it another member of the royal family or someone along those lines? And presumably it was in recognition for the services to the legal sector or Europe or Gibraltar. Tell us about that.
Well, thank you for your kind words. So I lost my seat in the May 2019 European elections. We fought those elections. They were very difficult, and my party did very badly. And a few months later, when Mrs. May stood down as Prime Minister, I got a call from her office saying she was minded to recommend to the Queen that I should receive a knighthood, and would I accept it? And I was enormously honoured. I have great respect for Mrs. May. I thought she did a remarkable job in very difficult circumstances. And so I was very honoured and said yes. And the day itself was fantastic. That was in January of last year, just before the lockdown and everything. And I was knighted by the Duke of Cambridge. So I was very honoured to meet him. He'd obviously been given a couple of lines about what I'd done and asked me a couple of questions. So it was a fantastic day for my wife and children. We went to Buckingham Palace, and I'm enormously grateful. It was a great honour to serve in public office. My 10 years as an MEP were an enormously fulfilling experience. I enjoyed it very much. I'm now enjoying another career in which I sort of run my own business. I'm part-time chair of the IMA. So, I'm a happy man. I feel very fulfilled at the moment.
It's nice to hear about. It's not nice. That's just such a throwaway word, isn't it? It's extraordinary to hear about the first-hand, from the horse's mouth, as it were, about the experience of being knighted. For those of you who are listening, perhaps or dialing in, if that's the right word, from outside of the United Kingdom, it's a relatively ancient tradition, and I'm a big. Well, I certainly used to be a big fan of the Arthurian cycle and Le Morte d'Arthur and the Death of Arthur, and this is certainly in its idea. It's something which goes back many centuries, if not aeons. And I remember seeing on the very sad passing of Captain Sir Tom just recently. They were playing the footage. The video footage of him being knighted by Her Majesty the Queen, and I have to say, it brought a tear to my eye on every level. It doesn't matter, maybe it does, doesn't matter what one thinks of the monarchy or politics or anything. I'm neutral, but it does stir something. I think it stirs something very, very deep within a person, especially if you're in Great Britain. The idea of it being incredibly noble and a tradition. Do you know if it's been I'm sure, I'm not asking you to be an expert. Is it a continual line, the idea of the knighthood? Does it go back to the mists of the Dark Ages, as it were, and the Knights of the Round Table, or is it a tradition which has been raised up again in the last few hundred years?
So forgive me, I'm not a great expert on this. I know there are different orders of knighthood in the United Kingdom. Certainly, the Order of the Garter is the most prestigious order. I'm what's called a Knight Bachelor. That means you don't belong to any particular order, but the history is that you were knighted on the battlefield, and this dates back to the 13th century.
Right.
Clearly now, service rendered to the Crown is very, very rarely military, though of course there are military knights. Most people have done it some form of public service, whether that's in business or in charity, or for the public services, the health service, education, or in my case, in politics. And it's a huge honour because it is public recognition that your contribution to society is valued. And I agree with you that I think our honour system is worthwhile and gives public recognition for valuable service.
Thank you. I had the privilege, myself and Sarah, of talking to an associate of ours called Sir Peter Ward, who, as obviously, is a knight as well, and he was the former head of the army, and is also, we're very lucky to say, leading our new Evo Ultra group called Mercury.
So he's a proper military knight, isn't he?
And an upright guy as well, and fascinating to be in his company as here as well. Okay, so we're going to move on to the last section. I'm going to bring back Sarah, and we've got lots of questions here. If you're okay for another 10 minutes or so, we'd love to sort of try and cram in about 5 questions, if that's okay with you, Ashley. So please welcome back Sarah Brooks. You are watching the Biz Live. We have got a sponsor called Professional Apprenticeship. We're going to bring Adam in if he pops up into the studio to ask a final question in a few minutes' time. But once again, do stay tuned because we've now got the Q&A section from you if you're watching on LinkedIn, and if you're on Facebook Live or on YouTube, I can't see the comments, but do please like and subscribe. Thank you very much. We'll see you in a few seconds' time. So you're watching the Biz Live. My name is Jamie Breeze. I'm the host and co-producer of the show, and co-hosting very well is Sarah Brooks, who has also been moderating the chat as per usual, keeping things in line, ship shape and Bristol fashion, as we say here in this part of the West Country. Ain't that right? Okay, so our guest today is Ashley Fox, and we've been talking about Brexit, Europe and beyond. Sarah, please put some questions to our guest.
Well, I thought it was kind of important just to bring out that point again about this date of the 30th of June, because obviously the IMA, with everything that's going on, has kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit, hasn't it? And, you know, it'd be important just to remind people. So it's EU citizens to register with the IMA before the 30th of June. Right. So, yeah.
Sarah, just hang on. They're not registering with the IMA, please.
Okay.
They're registering. It's a government scheme. They're registering with the Home Office scheme. Our role is to monitor and ensure their rights are upheld, but the IMA is definitely not responsible for the scheme. No,
but they can get advice through you, I presume. Can they?
Not advice, no. EU citizens have the right to complain to us if they believe that their rights are not being upheld. So we will monitor that public bodies, the United Kingdom government, the devolved governments, and all public authorities are respecting EU citizens' rights. In other words, treating them as they would have treated them before we left the transition period. And we will monitor that, we'll promote their rights. And if public authorities don't treat them properly, then we have various powers at our disposal to make sure that they do respect them.
Good stuff. Thank you very much for the clarification there. And Sarah, please tell us, give us a few questions and the person who's asking them, and I will bring up, we'll make sure we get the question up on screen for Sir Ashley. We've got about 10 minutes. Is that okay for you? Have you got a hard out today, Ashley?
I'm all yours, Jamie.
Good stuff. Thank you.
So we've got a question here from Ian Porter, going back to the EU. How long is it before the breakup of the EU? He ponders. What do you think?
Goodness me. Well, you know, I don't have the gift of foresight, but I don't think the EU is going to break up. I really don't. I think the peoples of Europe view the EU very differently to British people. Many of them view it as a peace project, reconciliation between France and Germany, as a means of entrenching democracy in countries like Greece, Portugal and Spain, who emerged from dictatorship in the 1970s and then joined the EU, and in the countries of Eastern Europe that emerged from communism. So I don't think the EU is likely to break up. I mean, it may do, but my guess is it won't. I think the EU has to resist the tendency constantly to centralize power. It has to respect the sovereignty of member states. And I think therein lies why Britain left. The EU became too intrusive, took too many powers to it, And that is why the call to take back control became so attractive to the British people. And if the EU did less and did it better, then in my opinion, it would be more successful.
Thank you. Sarah, what do you got next for us? Thank you.
Thank you. So Gareth Jones says, given the IMA's role in protecting the rights of citizens of the EU in the UK, what impacts are you already seeing or forecasting on those citizens' rights following Brexit?
Well, the IMA has received a number of complaints, but those are in the process of being assessed at the moment. So forgive me, I'm not going to comment upon those. What I would say is that when we look ahead as to what might cause trouble, the government settled status scheme does not provide EU citizens with a physical piece of identification that proves that they have settled status. They have an electronic code which corresponds to a code on a computer in the Home Office. Now, I'm fully aware that many EU citizens have raised concerns about this. They've asked for either a document, a proper stamp or visa in their passport, or a credit card type piece of plastic, something that proves that they can show to an employer or a landlord. I think we're a little bit early at the moment. I think we need to see how this government scheme works. The government is entitled under the withdrawal agreement to have a wholly electronic system. They've opted to do that. So we need to see how it works. But that is one of the things that the IMA will be looking at. Certainly when I had my confirmation hearing at the House of Commons before the Justice Affairs Select Committee, it was that issue that was raised by MPs that were questioning me. And I admitted, if I were an EU citizen, I would much rather have a physical document or a piece of plastic in my hand I could show to people. Government's opted not to do that. So let's see, does this electronic scheme work? I very much hope that it does.
And sort of following on from that, actually, what Leanne Pope asked, what are the rights for UK citizens living in Europe? Do you have anything to do with that, or is this solely, do you solely look after EU citizens or in this country?
Yes.
Is there a reciprocal agreement?
So first of all, the withdrawal agreement protects the rights of EU citizens in the United Kingdom, and it also protects the rights of British citizens who remain in the 27 EU countries. Now, just as the IMA will monitor the British government and public authorities in Britain, so the European Commission will take on that role in Europe. The European Commission will monitor how the 27 member states behave. So a British citizen abroad that believes their rights are not being respected, they also have the right to complain. I assume they first of all complain to the member state concerned, explain what the problem is and could they put it right. But if they didn't put it right, they have the right to complain to the European Commission.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, look, thank you very much indeed, Ashley, and also thank you very much indeed for all these great comments. Gareth Jones there saying thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Leanne, for your question. Thank you, Ian, as well. We're going to bring this part of the show with just a couple of minutes left to a close. We've got for the first time in each season, we're able to bring in our sponsor as well. So I'd just like to bring in Adam Rook, who is the co-director and founder of Professional Apprenticeships. They're 5 years old this April, I'm pleased to say, and Adam and Karina have, Karina Bush, have been running this, they've been a customer at the stadium events for a long time now. They've taken their company from 2 people to their 14th member in March. So please give a thumbs up in the Southwest business community. Adam is very well known and liked. So good afternoon to you, Adam. And have you got a question there for Ashley as we wrap things up? We've got a couple of minutes.
So this has been fantastic. So as a company that's European funded, this is something that we've been sort of monitoring and keeping an eye on over the past couple of years. But how do you see us being able to rebuild relationships with business in Europe after the current process is over?
I think little by little is the answer. I think certainly viewed out from Europe, Brexit has looked like an acrimonious divorce. You know, we have walked away from the relationship and they're deeply upset by that. And so, of course, there are a lot of hurt feelings. And at least to begin with, we mustn't expect the European Union to owe us any favours. And you know, they will be awkward and difficult at times. But you know, we're neighbours. We're only 25 miles away across the English Channel. It's in our interests to have the best possible relations with the European Union. And so I think little by little, that hurt will disappear. We'll realise that working together is in both our interests, that there's a lot of trade to be done that brings benefits to both sides. And that's the start of a process. And incidentally, I think the work of the IMA in ensuring that European citizens are well treated, fairly treated in Britain, is crucial to that process, just as I expect the European Commission to ensure that British citizens' rights are respected in Europe. And if we treat each other like the friends and neighbours that we are, I think that's the starting point to a good relationship in the future. Don't expect miracles overnight. You know, Brexit has been a trauma. And I think it's probably been more of a trauma for the EU than for us, because from their point of view, the idea of their ever closer political union, this project of building this political community, has suffered a great rupture, and they're deeply hurt by that. And we should have some sympathy for that point of view. They must respect the choice that the British people have made, but I think little by little we will rebuild those relationships.
William.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, look, I'm going to ask the last question, if I may, because I'm the host. But what we haven't touched on particularly, I think it will be on people's minds. And just to remind people, if you are watching on the catch up on LinkedIn, we're an accredited show. You can continue to comment and connect with those people. Do send connection requests if you think there's somebody you'd like to do business with or share a point of view with. Do that, because we're on LinkedIn. And Adam, thank you once again for your support this season. It's been fantastic. Without the sponsors, genuinely, we wouldn't be able to invest in a critical kit that we need to broadcast a show, whether it be the lighting or this aforementioned high-power computer, which is absolutely necessary. And it's actually the sponsors who really contribute to make that possible, but also add a through line as well and give us a badge of credibility. So thank you very much indeed for the whole season, Adam. It's been a joy to work with you moving forward. Of course, you're a member of said Evo networking. So if you do want to take part, you can go along and visit. You know this, Adam, because you've been a member of good standing for a year. But if you are in the United Kingdom, in fact, we have a member who's in Spain, actually, so we're European, as it were. You would like to come along, it's free for your first visit. Just pop into the Eventbrite page there or go to evo-networking.com. So just for the closing comments, I think it's time to look into a crystal ball, as I mentioned. We've got just a couple of minutes left, and I think it's important to ask you, having your finger on the pulse, what's your sort of personal thoughts, as it were, on the COVID crisis and the roadmap out of here? And when things, we asked Michelle Michael, MBE, a couple of weeks ago, we asked Graham, who you mentioned was the clerk for Europe, UK and Europe. What's your take on when we're going to be through with this and we'll have some semblance of normality?
Goodness me, well, I'm glad, Jamie, it isn't my job. But if you asked me to look into my crystal ball, it seems to me that the one thing that we've done exceptionally well in the United Kingdom is the vaccine programme. And my information comes from the media, from listening to the news, reading the newspapers. It does seem that the more people are vaccinated, the lower the rate of transmission. And it seems to me that the best way out of this is for as many people as possible to be vaccinated. Both of my parents in their late 70s, they've been vaccinated. I will be vaccinated when my term comes. And then hopefully, little by little, we'll see the schools go back on the 8th of March. We want to see non-essential retail open perhaps at the end of March. And then really, we want pubs and restaurants to open as soon as possible, but not before we know that the virus is under control. And that is the decision that Boris Johnson has to take. We all want him to take it as soon as he can, but if he takes it too early, we risk perhaps another lockdown, which none of us want, and that would be very bad for business. So he really has the judgment of Solomon to take. He has my best wishes. I think he has an almost impossible job to do in keeping everyone happy. Who'd be Prime Minister?
On that note, it comes to responsibility for me as the leader of this small community taking part today to express our huge thanks to not only Adam again for sponsoring all 4 episodes and keeping the show on the road. It really makes a difference. Please understand it does make a difference when you sponsor this show, and I'm looking forward to, I think you touched on potential us doing a live broadcast with some of your apprenticeships or something recently. So I think we can arrange that as a little bonus for your support and sponsorship. So consider that a given. Let's have a chat soon about that. Also to my co-host, Sarah Brooks, who's been working behind the scenes and also supporting Evo networking and so much more. And incidentally, if you're a CEO of a company with a significant turnover, if you're a leader of an organization with a number of employers, or employees even, maybe you've got some employers as well, then we are opening up a new Evo group. I mentioned General Sir Peter Wall. He will be leading the first group called it's called Mercury. And on the call today, we've had Ian Workman, I'm pleased to say, supporting, as always. He's the Managing Director of Barclays Business in the UK. And as we discovered last week on the show, or 2 weeks ago, he has 1 million business customers. He has to wangle. He didn't use those words. What would be the word? Wrangle. No, that's wrong as well. Wang, thank you. So, and he'll be leading the second group in due course, which is called Jupiter, if I've got it right, Sarah Brooks. And Sarah's behind the scenes working on that as well. I know Paul's been on the call today as well, taking part and supporting and making things happen. So we'll be launching that on the 17th of March. And so Ashley, you're going to be in that meeting and in our Ultra boardroom. Very excited to have you there, and hopefully you'll meet another great speaker to be announced. We're working on it. So that leaves me to say thank you to all of you taking part today. Thank you particularly to Adam and Sir Ashley, but also my co-presenter, Sarah Brooks. You have been watching The Biz Live. If you're watching on Restream, continue to comment. It will game the algorithms. There's no subscribe button. Maybe I'll bring that up with LinkedIn at some point. There's only 2,500 of us, as far as I know, who've got this accreditation. We'd love to have a subscribe button, and who knows, people can get an instant reminder when there's a show coming up soon. But we'll be back next week with a speaker to be confirmed. And thank you so much indeed to you all for taking part in The Biz Live. Have a wonderful rest of the week. And who knows, maybe we'll see you at Evo. And Ashley, we'll see you on the 17th of March. And Adam, I'll see you next week. And Sarah, I'll see you in about 3 minutes' time. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.
Here we are.
Hi, guys.
Hello. Oh.
Jamie's frozen.